Hi, my name is Marcus Wabshall. I'm an immigration attorney and the founding attorney of Veritas Immigration Law located in Southwest Florida. And today I want to talk about 8 legal options for undocumented immigrants to potentially stay permanently in the United States. So, as most people probably know, if you're not in the United States in some kind of valid immigration status, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to adjust your status to get permission to stay here permanently. And because of that, it's also very difficult, if not impossible, to apply for work authorization, to get a social security number, or even a driver's license in some states. So it's just very difficult to just live your life in a normal way. So I wanted to make this video and just talk about what are some legal options that somebody has if they find themselves in the United States without any kind of valid immigration status. So before I talk about these 8 ways, the first thing that I want to mention is there's basically 2 different ways that somebody can be in the United States unauthorized. So the first way is and probably the most obvious way is if somebody entered the United States illegally or without permission, that person would not be here in any kind of valid immigration status. Okay, so this is somebody just who snuck across the border or who just came in without coming into a port of entry without any kind of permission from immigration. Okay, so that's the first way. The second way that somebody can be in the United States unauthorized is if they entered the United States legally, such as, with a tourist visa or a fiancé visa or some other kind of visa, but they overstayed the visa beyond the amount of time they were permitted to stay. Okay, so in that case, that person would be out of status and would be, their stay in the U.S. at that point would be unauthorized. Okay, so depending on which one of these 2 categories you fall into is going to really affect your options. But I wanted to make this video to kind of just talk about people in both of these situations. What type of options might they have to stay permanently in the United States? Okay, so the first option, and probably the most well-known option, is by getting married to a U.S. citizen. So if you get married to a U.S. citizen, that generally will forgive certain types of immigration violations. Now, I did make a previous video that talked about how to adjust your status if you entered the United States illegally. And basically what I said in that video is that it's really, really difficult to adjust your status if that's how you came into the United States. However, if you're somebody who came into the United States legally through some type of visa process, and you simply overstayed the visa and you're out of status, that type of violation will generally be forgiven when you get married to a U.S. citizen. Okay? Now, so that's the first way. The second way for an undocumented immigrant to stay permanently in the United States is by filing for what's called asylum. And asylum is a special status that's reserved for people who are physically in the United States and who cannot go back to their home country because they either have suffered or they fear suffering persecution of some kind. The persecution that they have suffered or are afraid to suffer must be based on a certain type of category about themselves. And there's 5 categories that apply for asylum. Okay, so you have to fear to suffer or have suffered persecution based on your race, religion, nationality, your membership in a particular social group, or based on your political opinion. Okay, so that's asylum. You have to be physically present in the United States, and you have to file for asylum within 1 year of entering the United States. So maybe you came to the United States illegally, you came in, through the border, or you came in validly on some kind of tourist visa. However you came into the United States, as long as you are here, you can apply for asylum if you believe that, or if you have some kind of fear of persecution in your home country and you're not able to return because of that fear. Okay, so that's the second way. The third way that an undocumented immigrant can stay permanently in the United States is through what's called a cancellation of removal proceedings. This only applies to people who are currently in removal proceedings or deportation proceedings in immigration court. So if you're somebody who received a notice to appear in immigration court, or you're currently going through deportation proceedings, this is a potential option for you to stay permanently in the United States. You have to be able to prove certain things. You have to be able to prove, first of all, that you've been in the U.S. for 10 years consecutively, or physically present here in the U.S. for 10 years. You have to be able to prove extreme exceptional hardship would result to a qualifying U.S. relative if you were deported. You also have to prove that you've been in good moral character and that you don't have any certain types of criminal convictions. Okay, so those are the things you have to prove for cancellation of removal. It's also important to understand for this remedy, for cancellation of removal, this is an exclusively discretionary remedy that a judge can give you or not give you. So even if you technically qualify with all of the requirements that I just mentioned, the judge can still deny you. So this really, you really don't want to be in this situation, but if you are, this is a potential option for you. Okay, but you're required to have been in the United States for a certain amount of time. Like I said, you have to have been here for 10 consecutive years. Okay, so that's called cancellation of removal, and that's another option to stay permanently. Another option to stay permanently in the United States is what's called temporary protected status. And I kind of hesitated to include this category in the video because it's really not, it doesn't give you a permanent status. As the name implies, temporary protected status is a designation that the Department of Homeland Security gives to certain countries who are facing some kind of dangerous conditions in the country, such as an armed conflict, or maybe there's like some kind of natural disaster or some other kind of exceptional situation or circumstances that make it unsafe for an immigrant to return to their home country. Now, I'm going to put a list up on the screen of countries that currently qualify for temporary protected status. This isn't something that anybody can qualify for. It's only certain countries. And it will allow you to stay in the United States for a temporary amount of time, essentially as long as the Department of Homeland Security continues to designate your country as eligible, you'll be able to stay. But this is not really a route to a green card. Okay, there's no process to, no pathway to get a green card through temporary protected status. But it does give you lawful status here in the United States. So if you are here, or if you are eligible to come to the United States through temporary protected status, you could theoretically be eligible for some type of immigrant visa. Okay, so maybe somebody's here on their temporary protected status, and they meet and fall in love with a U.S. citizen and they get married. Okay, that would be a valid way to adjust your status, because you would be in the United States lawfully. Okay, so that's called temporary protected status. Another potential remedy for an undocumented person to stay permanently in the United States would be what's called the Violence Against Women's Act. It's also known as VAWA. And VAWA is a remedy that's available to spouses, parents, or children of abusive U.S. citizens. Okay, so if you are in this type of situation, VAWA is a special law that Congress created that allows you to self-petition for permanent residence in the United States due to an abusive U.S. citizen spouse. So the relationships that, just to be clear, the relationships that qualify for this would be someone who is a spouse, a parent, or a child of an abusive U.S. citizen. So I'm planning to make a more detailed video about how VAWA works, because a lot of people seem to have questions about this, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily know about this option. So I'm just gonna stop talking about it for the sake of this video, just because there's too many details to go through. But suffice it to say that this is an option for you if you find yourself in an abusive relationship to a U.S. citizen. Okay. The next two potential ways for an undocumented person to stay permanently in the United States are what are called humanitarian reasons. And these, so the first way that I want to talk about is what's called a U visa. And then the other one is called a T visa. So let me just talk about the U visa first. So a U visa is a special type of visa that is available to an immigrant who has been the victim of some kind of criminal activity and who is helpful or useful to law enforcement in the investigation of a crime. If you qualify for a U visa, it permits you to stay in the U.S. for 4 years, and then after 3 years, it gives you the option to apply for a green card. Okay, so if you have been the victim of some type of crime and you are actively working with law enforcement to investigate the crime and prosecute the crime, you can get this special type of U visa to stay here, to begin with on a temporary basis, but there is a pathway to permanent residency through the U visa. Similarly, there's another type of visa called a T visa that is specifically, it's similar to the U visa, but it's specifically designed for people who have been victims of trafficking, whether it's some type of human sex trafficking or drug trafficking or any type of human trafficking. If you have been the victim of any type of trafficking, and again, you can be helpful or useful to law enforcement in the prosecution of the crime, you can apply for a T visa, which much similar to the U visa, gives you first a temporary status to stay here for up to 4 years while the crime is being investigated and prosecuted, and then it gives you eligibility and a pathway to also apply for a green card. Okay, so those are called a U visa and a T visa, and they're designed for people who have been victims of crimes. So the government doesn't want, sometimes people will unfortunately abuse people who don't have valid immigration status with the belief that due to their immigration status, they won't be able to, they'll be scared to go to law enforcement and talk about and reveal themselves as victims of crimes because they're afraid of being deported. Okay, but these are special visas that if you have been the victim of a crime and you don't have some kind of valid immigration status, you can get valid immigration status if you can be helpful to the law enforcement in investigating and prosecuting the crime. The eighth and the last way I want to talk about getting permanent residence despite your immigration status is a very kind of unknown, I think it's a pretty unknown way, that's called parole in place. This parole in place is a special status that is available to a spouse of somebody who's in the military. And it's specifically available for somebody who entered the United States illegally but got married to a member of the U.S. Armed Forces. Parole in place allows that spouse to potentially stay in the U.S. validly and safely for 1 year, okay, so they won't be put in deportation proceedings. And it also forgives some of certain types of immigration violations. So there is potential for a person in this position to apply to adjust their status in a way that a regular person who's not married to a military member may not be able to do. Okay, so it's called parole in place, and it's for people who are spouses of members of the military. Okay, so those are 8 different ways that an undocumented immigrant can potentially stay permanently in the United States. I went over everything really quickly and briefly. There's a lot of details that go into each one of these things. So if you believe that you might fall into one of these categories, please reach out to me. I'll talk to you for free to evaluate your situation and see what we can do for you to help you to make the best decision possible. Please, you can contact us through our Facebook, through our website, or by calling us at 305-306-7833. Our Facebook has most of our information, most of our videos, and our calendar and to book appointments is all on our Facebook. You can also chat with us through Messenger or through WhatsApp. Thank you and have a great day.